So we know that minimum wage and the cost of living has been a hot topic in the Cayman Islands, and there are different views on what a minimum wage should be. So here with us today on Loop Cayman, which is part of the digital platform, is Mr. Lemuel Hurlston and Ms. Maureen Nabi, who are part of the minimum wage committee, who are looking at the analysis of minimum wage and what that should be, and also explaining more of the details about minimum wage. So as a start, could you, as the committee, sort of explain why you were established and what your main objectives are?
Okay, well, the Minimum Wage Advisory Committee is a government-appointed group of persons that have been selected to lead the research on updating and reviewing the current national minimum wage, which was established by legislation 7 years ago in 2016. And so we're not starting from scratch. We're starting from the last time that we did a review. And so I make that as the first point, that we're not starting from scratch. The second point I would make is that we are advisory only, and that is why we're called an advisory committee, which means that the government may or may not accept our recommendations. The last government accepted our report and our recommendations in their entirety, but did not follow through on implementing all of the recommendations that were contained in that report. So we hope this time around that we'll get a better result, and that more of the recommendations will be acted on a timely basis.
Now, when you say the government, do you mean cabinet, or does this go to parliament to ultimately be approved?
Right. Well, last time around, we submitted our report to cabinet, and cabinet tabled the report in the Legislative Assembly and thereby made it a public document. So I imagine that this time around we would have a similar experience where cabinet would first receive it, but ultimately it would be tabled in the legislative parliament for public viewing.
Could you sort of explain how minimum wage is looked at under the law when you talk about people who are making commission and gratuities versus others who don't have a commission or gratuities base?
Sure. Okay. The national minimum wage of $6 for certain industries can be broken down into two parts. The first part is that 25% of that $6 or $1.50 can be taken from the gratuity pool, which means that the employer has to come up with $4.50 an hour, match that with $1.50 from the gratuities to blend and arrive at a $6 minimum wage. And that is provided for in the regulations that govern minimum wage. We are debating that at the moment to determine whether that should remain as an allowable an allowance, or it should be reduced or eliminated altogether. And that's going to be one of the major controversies that we're going to have to confront when we make our final recommendation this time around.
Would you say you're looking at a national flat minimum wage now, or will you be looking at sectors and possibly deciding or possibly advising the government on a minimum wage on a sector by sector basis?
Right. Under the terms of reference that we've been given by cabinet, we're given the latitude and the flexibility of making whatever recommendations we deem appropriate. We're now engaged in a round of public consultations, and those public consultations will guide our thinking and our ultimate recommendations as to what we think is best for the country, based on in part, the public consultation results. So we're doing several surveys, and Maureen is heading up that research group. We're doing several surveys and analyses now to determine and to have the public input into this process. And once that consultation period has ended, we will then gather that data, analyze it, and put it in a format that we believe the public will understand how we have arrived at our final recommendations.
And when you talk about public consultation, what organizations or what groups are you meeting with? And do you have public meetings planned?
Yes, we have several surveys that are ongoing at the moment that will close at the end of July. We are also scheduling several public meetings in every electoral district of the islands. And we are also currently meeting with stakeholders from every major economic sector as a committee, with presentations being made to the committee by those stakeholders. And in addition to that, so there's presentations being done, there's surveys being carried out, and there are public meetings being planned, so that at the end of the day, no one should feel that they're being left out, because the survey, when you log in to do the survey, you can log in as an employer or you can log in as an employee, and you can choose whatever sector you're particularly involved in, so that it's a guided survey process, and the questions are pretty straightforward and simple, so that we're not making it overly complicated. And we're hoping, Maureen might be able to speak to this, but I think we're already having in excess of 4,000 responses to our general survey questions, and so that's an encouraging uptick in terms of the public reaction to it.
What methods are you using to reach as many people as possible? Because when we look at some of the other public consultations that the government is doing, some people say, I didn't know there was a meeting. I didn't know this was taking place, notwithstanding that posts were put on Facebook, Instagram, and the newspaper. So what methods are you using to try to reach a large audience?
Okay.
So one of the things in our, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'll just speak to a few of the ways we're doing outreach, both for awareness and then for action. So as Mr. Hurlston mentioned, we have been engaging with organizations like the Chamber of Commerce, UCCI, the Cayman Islands Legal Practitioners Association. Obviously, I think we've done quite a significant job on reaching out to people on social media. But when it comes to town halls, one of the ways that we're ensuring that the greatest number of people are aware is actually engaging their political representatives. And so once we finalize the dates, which will be in mid-August, we'll have those dates at the end of this week. Every member, every representative is going to get an invitation to the town hall that relates to their district. And a number of them we've already spoken to, and they're very encouraging with having their constituents show up to make sure their voices are heard. So I think that is another way that on the ground, we're trying to ensure that we have the biggest reach. And additionally, there are a number of people who they're not on social media, or maybe they don't pick up the print paper. We've been on a number of radio shows, talk shows, where people can call in and give their thoughts and opinions, and we've recorded all of those. And in addition to that, there are paper copies of the survey available at the public libraries. And we've done our best to make sure people are aware of that if they don't feel comfortable doing a digital survey, there is a paper option. So we're doing our best to make sure we get the largest representation from the community on the public outreach campaign. And we have actually, as Mr. Hurlston said, had a fantastic response so far. And people have identified, and we're predicting who are Caymanians and those who are responding who are residents. who don't identify as Caymanians. So again, a topic that affects everybody. So we're trying to ensure that we have the widest reach for public opinion.
Now, can you sort of explain what you found regarding the impact of a minimum wage on businesses? Because from the worker standpoint, I'm making a $15 minimum wage now, just hypothetically.
Mhm.
But if the minimum wage is raised from 6 to 15, hypothetically, what impacts have you heard from businesses that sort of increase will have on their business?
Okay, let me answer that one. We conduct the Economic and Statistics Office, the ESO, conducted a survey among businesses in Cayman. And one of the questions they asked in the survey was, if the minimum wage were to be increased by $1, $2, $3, or more per hour, what impact would that have on your particular business? And the responses to that so far have indicated that up to about $3 an hour, businesses would not consider passing on those increases to the consumer for inflation purposes. However, if we go more than $3 an hour, some businesses have said that they will have no alternative but to consider passing that cost on to the consumer. So we have to be very careful in trying to create a balance between what the workers feel is appropriate and what businesses feel that they can afford in this particular economic environment. And we're also trying to make a big distinction between a minimum wage and a livable wage. And we're going to spend some time in our report explaining to the public the difference in those two things, because people's livable wage is a lifestyle, and that's a choice. A minimum wage is to protect the people that are at the very bottom end of the economic ladder who may be exploited, and the minimum wage is simply a floor to prevent that exploitation from continuing. A minimum wage is the only wage that is enforceable by law or by regulation. A livable wage is a choice between an employer and his employees. So one is optional, the other one is mandatory. And people need to understand that our remit is to concentrate primarily on the mandatory minimum wage and not the optional livable, or some people say living wage. The living wage is a lifestyle choice, and that takes us into an area where everybody's needs are going to be slightly different, or everybody's desires are going to be slightly different. And so we have to concentrate really on setting the floor below which no one should be employed.
The balance that you talk about is important, because if after a certain increase in wages per hour, the employer will pass on the cost of the wage increase to their consumers, their clients, their customers, then that's important, because if the wage goes too high in the perspective of an employer, and they pass it on into the price of their product or service, that means that although you got a wage increase in terms of minimum wage, since the business has now increased its price, you're back in the same position.
Exactly.
So getting to that balance is going to be extremely important. Will you be involved in advising on enforcement or compliance with the rules?
Yes, that is one of our remits, and we have had several presentations done by the Department of Labor and Pensions, which is the government agency that is designated by law to have responsibility for compliance and enforcement. There are some challenges there within that department and that agency. And it may very well be that some additional resources may have to be allocated to beef up the enforcement arm or capability of that agency to do its work properly, because at the moment it appears as if they are short-staffed or understaffed. And so we're going to be having to make specific recommendations in regard to enforcement and compliance. And the last time around, what we did at the end of the exercise, when it was all completed, the government published a 4-page pamphlet that asked all of the basic questions and provided all of the basic answers right underneath the question. And that was a pamphlet that was widely circulated and, of course, available online as well. And on this occasion, we might recommend that the government produces a similar sort of guidance notes to answer those kind of fundamental questions, so that people can refer to those guidance notes when they are considering taking employment, or when they're having issues with compliance and enforcement. They can refer to those notes to help guide them through what could otherwise be a rather complicated process. We'll try and break it down in terms of simplicity and effectiveness, so that good communications can result. We are fully resourced. Our committee consists of 18 members, 6 members representing employers, 6 members representing employees, and 6 independent members, and that includes civil society. So we're very well represented, and we are also fully resourced. There's nothing that we've asked for that the government has denied our committee. We're fully funded for expenses in terms of our surveys and our public consultation process. So I can't say anything but thank you for the response that we've gotten from government in providing us with the tools that we need to do the job. And we're getting on as quickly as we possibly can, with the target of submitting our report to Cabinet by the end of September. That's the target date.
When people talk about minimum wage numbers in other countries compared to Cayman, what are your views on that? Do you think that's a fair comparison?
If it is put in the correct context, it can be a fair comparison, but each country has to set a minimum wage based on the circumstances on the ground in their particular jurisdiction. And it can be unfair to compare apples with oranges. So one has to be very cautious and careful in how that comparison is made. On the other hand, we do live in a region that has certain similarities and commonalities. And so there can be some comparison made, but it needs to be made with the understanding that you're not comparing like with like. You're comparing a range of possibilities, and you can be within that range and still be fair. So we look at the region, but we're not obligated to follow the pattern of the region, because we must remember too that many of the countries in the region are countries that are heavily unionized for workers. And in those situations, the unions will do the negotiating on behalf of the workers. In our case, the government has set up a sort of a tripartite system of review, where the committees consist of representatives of employers, representatives of employees, civil society, and independent members. And that combination gives us the ability to access information on from a wide range of stakeholders, and come up with a recommendation that is uniquely tailored and suited to Cayman. So we can compare it to others, but at the end of the day, we have to live with what we think is best for our community.
The solution for Cayman is going to be unique, and sometimes it's very hard to make a comparison between Cayman and other countries, because those other countries have different structures as well in terms of taxes. In other countries, they probably regulate certain utility providers in a different way, so they can control the cost of other services in the economy, or they can regulate the cost of certain services in the economy and certain prices in the economy. Is there anything you want to share on any meetings that are coming up? What sort of dates do you project for meetings?
So the projected dates for the meetings are August 13th to 17th.
Excellent. Good idea. And thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss the subject with you. It's important to us to get the word out and to have public engagement and public consultation. This is a critical part of our work, and we really encourage the public to respond to all of the survey questions, to come out to public meetings, to participate in our focus groups, and to engage in whatever way the public feels is appropriate to them, because at the end of the day, it will affect some people in our society in a meaningful way, and we're trying to do the best job that we possibly can to meet our terms of reference and our objectives. So thank you so much for having us.
Well, thank you for your time as well, and we hope that many people come out to listen to the conversation and to learn more about minimum wage and livable wage, and to learn about the options and the different factors and the challenges that will be experienced during this process. And I hope that we can come to a unique solution that makes everyone happy. But thanks again for your time, and we look forward to a successful, unique solution for the Cayman Islands.
Thank you very much, Alric. Have a good day.
Okay, thanks.